I was taken away by kind strangers. This happened to me as a 12-year-old girl. It is more than half my lifespan ago, but I still get really uneasy when thinking back to it. I tried to block it from my mind and not guess as to what could have happened if not for those two kind strangers. I was walking home from school one day. At one of the intersections I crossed, there was a tall, dirty-looking man that noticed me. I would guess his age was early 30s. Being a kid back then, I struggled telling the age of adults. He started following me and trying to strike up a conversation. He kept telling me that I was beautiful and that he wants us to be friends. He asked me where I lived and if my parents would be home. He asked me so many questions, but I tried to just shrug him off and be polite. I didn't answer any of his questions, just increased the pace at which I walked. When we were nearing the block on which I lived, I started becoming really uneasy. He wanted to follow me home, and I did not want him to. He gave off a weird vibe, because adults did not usually speak to me that way. The only way I could get rid of him would be to give him my cell phone number and agree to answer when he calls. Because this situation made me uncomfortable, I gave him a fake phone number and hightailed it out of there. A few months passed without me running into that man again, so I completely put this out of my mind. He was probably just some random weirdo. However, as you can guess from here, things did not stay that way. Around 4 months later, I found myself walking home after school again. I will admit that I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. That was until I heard what sounded like footsteps running up behind me. I reflexively turned to look around, and it was that same creepy man that I had encountered before. He slowed his pace as he reached me, but was yelling the entire time. He figured out that I had given him the wrong number, and he was furious. He kept yelling and yelling. He thought that I was better than him, and that is why I gave him a fake phone number. I was terrified in that moment, as he was very angry. I was afraid that he was going to hurt me, but couldn't grab the attention of any motorist. I speed walked to the closest petrol station, with him following behind me, still yelling the entire time. When I got to the petrol station, I immediately got the attention of two burly men standing next to their pickup truck. They must have seen the terrified look on my face. They immediately ran over to ask if I was alright. I was too scared to speak, just shook my head frantically. As I tried to get behind them, they immediately demanded to know why the man was following me. He fed them some nonsense line about being my brother. I just silently kept shaking my head. I guess they figured out what was happening at this point, as they started yelling at the man, accusing him of something. I did not stay to find out. I took the opportunity of him being distracted to start running away. The man noticed that I was leaving and tried to take off after me. The burly men really took offense to this, as they immediately tackled him and threw him in the back of their pickup truck. He was screaming at this point. They sped off with the guy at an inconceivable speed, right past me, and just kept going. I was happy that they took him away, but I did not stop running until I reached home. I had no idea what to make out of this entire exchange, but it really shook me. I do not know where they took the creepy guy or what they did to him after. In all honesty, I did not want to know. I told my parents and altered the route I walked home from school. I never saw him again, and I am thankful for that. Even though I could not say what I needed in that moment, those two kind strangers saw that I was in distress and dealt with it for me. I encountered with a stranger at the beach, and it was a lot worse than I thought. I never had the stranger danger talk with my parents, and we lived in a small town where I liked and trusted everyone. Starting at age 6, I was taught to commute by public transportation alone or with my younger brother. Never thought an adult would harm a child, except my grandma for some reason. When I was 11, I was walking alone at the beach when a middle-aged man approached me and asked to take a photo of me. I smiled and he snapped a photo with his little digital camera. He then asked me to take off my shirt, saying we were at the beach and I would look a lot better in the photo without it. I actually thought it was an appropriate thing to ask, and I obliged and smiled again for the photo. I didn't feel uncomfortable or scared. He tried to make conversation and ask what I like to do. I told him I like to play video games. He told me he has a PlayStation in his room and invited me over to play video games. If the sun wasn't almost down, I probably would have said yes, to be honest. Instead, I said I had to go back to my family's room because it was getting late. He held my shoulder, urging me to come with with him. I told him again that I can't go with him. He hugged me and said goodbye. I just thought it was weird, the hugging part, and not everything else, because I was never really a physical touch kind of person and really liked my personal space. But I just shrugged it off and never spoke about it to anyone. Years later, in one of my deep shower thoughts, I realized how messed up that was. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I had a scary, confusing experience. I was living in a small college town in Pennsylvania. I was with my mother and brother in a small one-story house. It sat at the corner besides IUP. It was the 90s. My mother was not a good parent and had a habit of leaving us home alone from a very young age. One day, she was going to walk to the grocery store. It was about a 10 to 15 minute walk. She asked me to go along, and I chose to stay at home that day. I don't remember specifically why, but a few minutes after she leaves, I changed my mind. I look out the window and I see her standing with my little brother at the intersection. I ran to her and yelled, "I wanna go, I wanna go." She says, "Go grab a jacket." I run home and grab the jacket, and when I got back to the intersection, my mom was gone. I figured she got impatient and just left. In my peripheral vision, I saw a man. He's a younger, maybe early 20s, black trench coat and spiked hair, and he's on rollerblades. He starts to come towards me, and me as a paranoid child starts running as fast as I could. At this point, I hear his rollerblades behind me, and he's catching up to me. I reach my house and run in and lock the door behind me. I grab this metal pipe that recently broke off of something in the bathroom and hid it under my bed. I hear knocking and pounding at my front door. I was so scared. I thought, this is how I'm going to die. I just remember thinking, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die fighting. I was going to hit him as hard as I can and as much as I can. The knocking stops. My heart is still pounding. I waited for some time. I didn't know how long it felt, but it felt like forever. Slowly, I crawled out from under my bed, and as soon as I turned my head, he was there at the window. He's looking right at me. I screamed and ran back under my bed and just waited for my mom. She finally came home, and I told her everything, and she didn't believe me, which always bothered me. I still wonder what he wanted. What would he have done to me?